Okay, this part of the meeting is going to be the consideration of the motion read a horse and greyhound racing fund regulation 2018. I'd like to welcome Minister Michael Creed, TD, Minister for Agriculture, Marine, as officials here today. The purpose of the meeting is the motion before us today is referred to by the Dáil and Senate on 22nd November 2018 for consideration, imposing a deadline date for which the committee must report back by the 29th of November. Just to remind members, remind members of long-time planning practice the fact that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either person outside the House and officially by name, or just ways to make him or her identifiable. Call on the Minister now to make his opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The horse and greyhound racing industries occupy a special place in the Irish psyche and a key position in the rich tapestry of Irish sport. They are valuable to our economy, central to our identity and cornerstones of our social and cultural heritage. An important pillar of government policy is to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential and in so doing contribute to economic and social development across a wide geographic swathe of the country. Time and again through the years, governments have acknowledged the importance of these industries and have supported them through legislation and policy initiatives. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop into a world centre of excellence for horse racing, greyhound racing and breeding. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been front and centre in providing this investment and has played a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of these industries. These industries receive financial support from the state through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund under Section 12 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act of 2001. My department makes payments from the fund to Horse Racing Ireland and Board Nagan. In the period 2001 to date, a total of €1.2 billion has been paid from the fund to the horse and greyhound racing industries, and in accordance with the provisions of the Act. The cumulative upper limit on payments from the fund provided for under the relevant legislation has been reached. Exchequer funding provided from the fund is crucial to the survival and continued development of the horse and greyhound racing industries. In order to give effect to the provisions of Budget 2019, this cumulative upper limit must be increased by regulation. The estimates for my department, passed by both houses as part of Budget 2019, include an allocation of €84 million for the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund. This will be distributed in accordance with Section 12, subsection 6 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001, with 80% going to HRI, or €67.2 million, and 20% going to Board Nagan, or €16.8 million. In order to allow my department to provide the monies allocated in Budget 2019, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under Section 12, subsection 13 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act to increase the cumulative limit on the amount payable from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund by €84 million to some €1.28 billion. This is achieved by way of the regulations submitted to this committee today. The aggregate limit on the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been increased in this manner in 2004 and in 2009 to 2017 inclusive. The 2017 Deloitte report into the economic impact of Irish breeding and racing, commissioned by Horse Racing Ireland, indicates that the total direct and stimulated expenditure of the Irish breeding and racing industry is estimated at €1.84 billion in 2016. In addition, it is estimated that there are 15,200 jobs at the core of the racing and breeding industry or in directly related industries. Horse racing generates a very significant return to the rural economy in Ireland and a positive international profile for our country. Of course, behind all the facts and figures are the thousands of men and women who, directly and indirectly, make the Irish racing and breeding industry what it is today. As proven in 2018, Irish owners, trainers, jockeys and horses are setting standards globally, and their stellar achievements and enduring influence underscore Ireland's international prominence. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at a global level, despite other major racing nations having much larger populations and economies. Despite our size, we are the third biggest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world, and estimates place Ireland only behind the United States as the biggest seller of bloodstock by public auction globally. However, the significant threat posed by Brexit to the current ease of movement of horses between Britain and France, in addition to the global nature of major breeding operations, illustrate that while Ireland arguably now has a leadership position within Europe, its preeminence is not guaranteed. It is worth noting that government funding, in addition to supporting this key industry, also presents an excellent opportunity to yield a high return for its investment, leading to a flow of income right through the economy. Support for certain strategic industries is important for future economic growth and can provide widespread benefits for our society as well as for our economy. According to the 2017 Power Report, the greyhound industry provides and supports considerable employment both directly and indirectly across the Irish economy. It is estimated that in 2016 the industry supported 5,058 full-time and part-time jobs in the economy. In addition, there are 7,313 active greyhound owners. The total number of people deriving economic benefit from the sector is estimated at 12,371. It is an industry that is deeply ingrained in the social and cultural networks of rural Ireland. The future of the industry is dependent on a strong governance platform and on the industry having the highest standards of integrity and welfare founded on a strong regulatory system. I am very pleased that the Greyhound Racing Bill is progressing well through the Seanad under the stewardship of my colleague Minister Doyle, and I look forward to its smooth progression through the Dáil. In addition to its focus on the core business of greyhound racing, Bord na Gan places a strong emphasis on regulation of the industry and the welfare of greyhounds. It is evident that the successful growth and sustainability of the industry is heavily dependent on public confidence in the integrity of racing. To this end, I welcome the fact that Bord na Gan continues to invest significant resources into regulation and greyhound welfare. The advent of new technologies and business models has challenged government to re-evaluate the funding mechanisms for the industry. As part of its overall commitment to the industry, the government has addressed through legislation the anomaly whereby remote and online betting operators were outside the tax net. The measures introduced in the Betting Amendment Act 2015 had a positive effect on revenue streams, with significant increases being realised. It is worth noting that betting taxes increased from a total of 31 million for 2015 to 52.2 million in 2017. I welcome Minister Donoghue's announcement in his budget speech for 2019, whereby betting taxes being increased from 1% to 2%. It is estimated that this increase will contribute 40 million to the Exchequer in 2019. In conclusion, given the wide geographic distribution of these two industries, they are fundamental to the achievement of a more balanced regional economic growth. Relieving the burden on our major urban centres and nurturing rural economies is a key priority for the government. In this context, these industries should be given recognition for the considerable contribution that they make to rural economic activity and employment. Brexit poses an array of substantial threats to the Irish economy, and coupled with the fact that we are a small and open economy naturally prone to volatility, it is difficult to predict what the future holds. It is therefore more important than ever that we support these important industries to help maintain sustainable growth in these sectors. Both sectors also face a series of challenges in the areas of funding, infrastructure and staffing, but even in the face of all these challenges, the industries are steadfast in their ambition to build on recent progress and success. Accordingly, I am asking you all for your support to ensure that Horse Racing Ireland and Bord na Gan receive the funding provided for in Budget 2019, and that the very important role played by these industries and the economic activity generated by them are sustained into the future. I commend this regulation to the committee, and I look forward to discussing any matters arising. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Cahill is first up.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, Minister, for your presentation. As you said at the outset, two very important industries for the economy as a whole, and especially for rural Ireland. There's a number of issues I want to raise, Minister, and the first one is harness racing and the attempts of harness racing to get off the ground in the country. And, I suppose we're all, as committee members, we've been lobbied by the Harness Racing Association, and they have put forward, my understanding is they have put forward a 5-year strategic plan for their industry, and they've done this in cooperation with the department. And, France are putting their shoulder to the wheel in trying to get this industry going here in this country, and they've committed to investing 245,000 in prize money here in Ireland for 2019, and so far the French have put in 550,000 into harness racing in this country. There was a meeting held in Dundalk last year in which 5 races were run, and on the PMU in France, 850,000 was bet on the PMU on those 5 races. So I think that shows that the interest in this racing is there, and the potential for the industry to develop and expand is there. And as you showed there in your presentation, Minister, the tax going from 1 to 2% is going to yield another 40 million for the exchequer. But this industry has the potential, if they can get the funding to get up and running, has the potential to I suppose be self-financing when they get into a position of having more race meetings. Now, obviously, it doesn't compare in size to either horse racing or greyhound racing. At the moment, they reckon there's around 320 or 330 trainers and owners in the business. But I'm sure, with more regular meetings, that number would increase. Now, my understanding is the request is for a once-off 250,000 as seed capital, that you would want 650,000 then per annum ongoing to fund the industry and get it established. I think, Minister, this proposal from Irish Harness Racing Association demands careful scrutiny, and I think they have shown that they're able to run the industry and run it well. And their pilot race meetings have been successful, and I think with the funding that they're requesting and with a strategic plan in place, I think this request is I think worthy of serious consideration. Now, the point was made to me that they had this plan in place for September, and that their proposal was there a good few weeks or months before budget day, and that they would feel that to be left another 12 months waiting is going to really put a handbrake on the development of their sport. So I suppose I'm putting to the Minister that I would like your views on immediate funding for this segment of our horse sport industry, and will the request get I suppose favourable consideration. Now, the second industry I want to talk about is Horse Sport Ireland, and I suppose we had representatives of Horse Sport Ireland in here last week. And Minister, you were making your presentation there, and you talked about the excellence of our sport and the way our horse racing, and that I suppose. Pardon?
Alliance.
Horse Sport Alliance. Sorry, Chair. Horse Sport Alliance. There's so many bodies I get mixed up with them anyway. Horse Sport Alliance. But the one point, and it took me 3 or 4 times to get the answer out of Horse Sport Alliance here last Tuesday evening, was the amount of Irish-bred horses that are jumping internationally now as a percentage of the horses that are competing for Ireland. And the figure that we were given was only 10% of the horses that are jumping competitively for Ireland are Irish-bred. And to me, that sends a warning signal as regards the route that this business is heading. And unless there was a time, if you go back to the Aggie teams of the 70s, all those horses were Irish-bred. And the vast majority were Irish-bred. I suppose to say an exclusive statement like that would be wrong, but the vast majority were Irish-bred. And even you'd see the Army Equestrian Centre. It's a long time now since we've seen a representative of those jumping internationally for us. And to me, of all the presentation they made, so obviously there were requests and funding for their industry and the development of their industry. But the point that they made that only 10% of those horses, I think that shows that there's something wrong within our horse sport industry. And obviously it hasn't the ability to create finance. Betting definitely isn't widespread in their industry, whether it is eventing or show jumping. They don't attract betting like other industries that involve horses. But I think they made a lot of points here the last day, and I'm not saying everything they said was correct, but to me, I think we have to give serious consideration to where this industry is going when there's only that level of Irish-bred horses jumping competitively for the country. So again, I think they made requests here for funding the last day. Most of them was looking for better infrastructure and better prize money for shows. And I think again, Minister, it's something that we need to sit down and analyse. And I think before it's too late, We need again to start breeding horses here that can jump internationally. And we were renowned for horses we produced in the past, and obviously we have definitely slipped down the scale as regards producing eventers and show jumpers. Just on you talked here about the Greyhound Bill, and the Greyhound Bill and its progressing, and that's welcome. I suppose one thing that I would like to see happening, Minister, and is something I've raised here on a number of occasions, is that we would have one lab for horse racing Ireland and the greyhound industry, and that's something I would like to see progressed. And the integrity of greyhound industry, there has been a lot of sticks and stones thrown at it. Whether they're all merit or not is a different question. But to me, at this juncture, I think to have one lab is common sense. Now, some tells me that there's different requirements as regards testing dogs and testing horses, but surely to have the lab under one roof would be the most economical way to go. And we need a lab that can do the samples that are taken, and that those samples can stand up to any scrutiny in any court. And I think that's something that definitely isn't watertight at the moment. And if someone is found guilty of a prohibited substance, the full rigours of this new act has to be able to be enforced. And I think a properly funded lab governing the two industries, I think, would be a welcome step forward. And I'm nearly finished, Chairman. Now I'm being long-winded, but I'm nearly finished. Just the betting tax and the increase in the betting tax, Minister, and I know this will be in the finance bill, but I have serious worries about on-track bookmakers and that they're going to disappear as part of the industry. And they're an integral part of our whole, of the whole, I suppose, social scene at race meetings, be they horse or dogs, and they bring a unique atmosphere to the events. Their numbers have dropped hugely in the last couple of years, and the turnover definitely at midweek race meetings is now very low. And I think if the betting that is done on course, and I'm only talking about on course, if the betting that's done on course, I think if they were given an exemption from this increase in tax, it would be some incentive for some of those sole traders to stay in business. And I am worried that they are competing with the online business and the computers that we're all working, and there's an awful lot of business done online, and an awful lot of betting is done that. And I'm not talking about that, making that exempt. I think the increase in tax is the way to go there, and I think it's the way to fund the industry going forward. But I think we need some recognition of on-track bookmakers and to try to keep them in business, because the figures will show, I would say, we've only about 30–35% of what we had 10 years ago. And I think if we don't do something to arrest that decline, we are going to lose an integral part of what makes a day at the race or night of the dogs enjoyable. So those are the points, and obviously, we support Fianna Fail, we support the allocation of exchequer funding to these industries, and we will be supporting it in the chamber. But those I suppose, questions and observations I would like the Minister to answer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Penrose, next, please.
Thanks, Chairperson. Well, the Labour Party, we have always recognised the important role that the horse and greyhound industry has played in relation especially to the rural economies and their backbone there in terms of employment, and important for the preservation of our future, of our ongoing development and culture, and indeed that. But help, I suppose, continue our prominent role in the equestrian and greyhound industries both at home and abroad in terms of, and like Deputy Cahill, I mean, Minister, you have a copy of the Irish Harness Racing Association submission, the plan. You wanted a copy of the 5-year plan. I understand that went into you in mid-October. So you have an opportunity to review that. I mean, I think last year we understood that you would give it serious consideration when we raised it at this committee, so I anticipate that you will. But there's only about 750,000 required. And they do need, it's not just seed capital, they do need some capital funding as well, I mean, to try and seed funding is all right, But capital funding is absolutely critical in that regard. And the future is that they will be making a contribution. They have set a basis. You were right. You insisted upon them satisfying certain criteria, and have done that in relation to protection and integrity of the thing and the structures, and in relation to the welfares and all those issues. And you're right about that, because it's absolutely critical. But I think that it would be important that you would recognise them and give them an opportunity from 2019 to going forward. Again, we had Horse Sport Alliance last week, Minister, and they made a very forceful contribution to our committee in relation to various issues. I don't think we can easily dismiss them, and we should pay attention to the various points that Mr Broderick and other people made to this committee last week. Look, I mean, I've maybe the experience of being long enough here, Minister. I think you might have been here yourself in 2001 when Minister Walsh, I think you were actually, Minister Walsh was brought forward a 2001 Act in this area. And, I supported it. But one of the things I remember is that the ceiling that time was 200 million, as far as I remember, to the fund. And now it's increased to 1.3 billion over a 17-year period. Now, that's a 650% growth in that fund, despite recession in the middle of it. Now, we had a couple of recessions. There was certainly one when there wasn't a recession. It was a blowout. So I mean that's fairly serious, and it has been raised, and it's significant funding going direct from the taxpayers to those two industries, and we have to recognise that. And the important thing from that perspective is to get value for money. I think, Minister, you'll be very critical of that. It's important. So the centre question is whether the public is getting value for money from the growing subsidy to both industries. And, as I said, there's doubtless importance in preserving and protecting jobs of these traditional industries and keeping the traditions vibrant and protecting them going forward. But we're certainly increasing it far in excess of inflation. And what concerns me, is at the end of the day, HRI come in here, and we have certainly put new governance structures and everything in place. What concerns me is that they've indicated that their objective is to get to the point that they don't have to rely upon you at all, or the Exchequer, for any funding, and that the monies that they get would be like tax revenues raised in various remote and online betting and all like that. And I would like to see that day coming, because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that will happen, because it's extremely important. To people out there that this is it. I mean, I don't know. I think in 2016, I remember it was 37 or 38 million went in prize funds. Now, I'm quite happy for prize funds to be going to the ordinary little horse trainers and horse owners and small horse tracks. Let it be Kilbeggan, Ballinrobe, Roscommon, any of those places where I do Turles, correct, and Clonmel. All those places, absolutely. And Naas. And Gordon, not too bad, no, yeah, not too bad. Condys are good sponsors down there. I had to be down there, Mr. Chairman. But, all of those small races, they get hard. You know yourself, they're out there surviving. They're looking for sponsorship. They're getting hard to survive. And when you look at it, a lot of the prize money is going, as far as I see, it's going nearly to the one place, or to the two or three places. The big boys are cleaning up. They have tax-free stallion status, they have everything else, and they're bringing home the bacon every weekend. And that's grand to a point. But soon the little people are washed away. And I don't mind taxpayers' money going in to mind the little people. That's where I don't mind where it's going in, as long as it's going into there. Protect them. Lots of great people down there, the Peter Downs of this world, Russell Stud, great breeders over the years, give us some great horses, won major races. But it's a tough job for those people to survive, 3 or 4 mares and stuff like that. It's a very easy job when you're can call 75,000 or 125,000 for a stallion fee. It's not too bad surviving in that game. And then go out to Saturdays or Sundays and clean up as well. And there's a lot of this money going into the prize funds. So I'm in this game, so I have an idea. But I'm in there to represent the small little people. That's where I am. The people who can have accountants and everything else, they're well able to look after themselves, so I have no sympathy with them at all. So I would like to make sure, and I'm looking forward, Chairperson, to Mr Kavanagh appearing here, because this is not Minister Creed's job, merely, but still I'd like to send a signal to him. I'd be looking forward to the Chairperson and the Chief Executive of HRI and all like that appearing here, because I have a few points to follow up. For example, I mean, it's a beg and race course. Senator Daly's Chairperson, he's not here today, he's on another mission with another committee. Yeah, they're a long time looking for the few bob, Chairperson. And conditions are attaching to them that, you know, not attached to other loan or other grants. So, I want to drill down into this. And I'm quite happy that money be given over, as long as the prize money has to be increased to ensure that the ordinary little racehorse trainer, the ordinary owners, this little syndicate, start keeping the thing going through thick and thin. And, you know, HRI there, I think in 2016 I saw, a group surplus of 4.8 million. Well, of course, you can have that if you're charging an owner for renewing. You have a set of colours in 2017, and you have the same set of colours in 2018, and you have to pay to renew them. That's a nonsense. The GAA club doesn't, if it doesn't change its jerseys, it doesn't have to go into the county board as a former chairperson, you know that, and start paying at January for the renewals. There's too many little obstacles to the small people. And there's always, as a fellow said to me one time, if you owed a bank manager one time years ago £1,000 and you didn't pay it, you'd be come out and someone would be arresting you. If you owed him £100,000, he'd be out scrubbing the globe in case you'd fall going in. And that was the way it was. And it's the very same with this. There's an old step and I can't use it because there's a little profanity in it back home from my own place. But there's too much grease going to oil the wheels that the very well-to-do are getting richer out of this game. And the small little people are struggling. So with that reservation, I support what the Minister is doing, but sending a signal that support is no longer free and easy, that it's qualified support on the basis that I want to ensure that the small tracks get a good share of the money and that the small trainers and the people who have the syndicates, I think that they have an opportunity of securing decent funding through prize money when they have a little horse that might be running.
Thanks, Deputy. Just for the information of members, HRI Chief Executive and Chairman will be before the committee here either the last meeting before Christmas or the first meeting after Christmas.
I'll leave it the first meeting after Christmas. We'll have a lot of thinking.
You'll be ready for him.
We'll have a lot of thinking done by that.
Deputy Kenny, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for your open statement. I was just looking at the final paragraph in the final sentence of the third paragraph, that the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been front and centre in providing this investment and played a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of these industries. And certainly over a period of time we have, €1.2 billion been spent in these two industries, and it's to be acknowledged, you know, the Irish horse all over the world is renowned, and we have all that culture and identity and all that associated with it. And, you know, I was just thinking here as Deputy Penrose was talking about, you know, at the moment we have the Irish sugar beet industry trying to get off the ground. And they'll be looking for help and looking for investment, possibly from the state. And if we were in 10 years' time looking at a statement in front of us that they were after getting €1 billion over a period of time, we'd be saying, what the name of God is wrong that these people can't get an industry going that will at some stage become self-sufficient? And there is, I think, an element of that here. And certainly, if you like, two different sets of standards, where we see that, you know, and we've all had representations from the people of the harness racers, and they're trying to get off the ground and trying to get going and looking for small enough amount of money to get a fledgling industry going in a particular sector of this, and finding it very difficult, and finding that they've put in reports, and when they put in a report, they're referred here and referred there and everywhere. But at the end of the day, nobody sits down with them and says, "Okay, here's the solution. We want to work this out with you." And come up with a solution, and you've done your plan, and your plan shows us an element of a serious element of sustainability in it, and where you can go, and yet they're not getting fair wind. That's certainly the experience, and I think it will be the experience of most members that have spoken to them. That's what we're hearing back. However, the horse racing industry, which is an industry which is really, a multi-million euro industry, is continuing to get a lot of support from the state. And I'm not going to judge the right or wrong of that, but I would judge the ongoing sense of continuing that indefinitely. And surely at some point or other we have to come to a stage where we say, is it like, and we had the department in earlier talking about the areas of natural constraint, but these aren't areas of natural constraint. In general, an awful lot of it is in areas where, and I know from speaking to farmers, certainly I know in County Tipperary there's farmers down there that say they can't buy land, they can't compete with the big stud farms that are coming buying the land from everyone, and no other farmer can compete with them. And I'm not saying the market isn't wrong. The market does what the market does. But ultimately, at some point or other, as a state, we have to say to ourselves, have we got a plan here for this industry for it to become self-sustainable, or close? Or if it's not become self-sustainable, what areas of it require the investment to make it self-sustainable, or if there's areas of it that will continue, that will need ongoing investment, where are they? And be more specific about it, because I just have a problem, Minister, with writing out a big cheque and handing it to horse racing Ireland and say, away you go lads and spend that how you like. And that's the problem that we all have here. And I think, in general, that there needs to be a wake-up call in regard to that. And I know I've spoken to you about this before and I've complained about it, and it's not to beat anyone up. I recognise this industry does employ a lot of people. But I do have a problem, and I think most honest taxpayers out there have a problem, that they see, some of the very well-fed sector getting more, and others getting less. And we need to bring a sense of balance back into it. Also, and I know the Greyhound Bill is progressing, and the greyhound industry is an industry that has certainly had a lot of its critics, and there are a lot of problems there. And we would hope that this new legislation will deal with some of those problems. Personally, I don't think it really matters what legislation you put in place. If people are out to do the wrong thing, they're going to do the wrong thing. And I think that, unfortunately, in elements of that, a culture of that has developed. And how that changes, I don't know. But it will take a very firm hand and a very long rod to get it back into shape. And I certainly hope that it does get back into shape. But, Minister, I would ask you to reflect on that, and to where this is going long term, because I don't think, whether it's the people that are here now or others are in this position in 10 years' time, that we should be looking at 2.5 or 3 billion having been spent on these industries over a period of time. That isn't, I just don't think it's sustainable to continue it in this manner. I think there has to be some effort made to take a grip of it and say, OK, there's elements of this industry that need support, let's support those elements, but not just hand out a cheque with a certain amount to an organisation and let them come back and tell us how to spend it. I don't think that's appropriate.
Thanks, Deputy. Thanks, Deputy. Senator Mulhern, next, please.
Thanks. Welcome, Minister and officials. I think it's very clear that there's a serious commitment through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, the annual fund there, which was approved, of course, most recently, 84 million in the budget, as you have said, to the two sectors, or the sector. And I think when you're putting money in there, you're supporting rural development, you're supporting sustainability. And I suppose, similar to some of the comments that have been made, one would like to see it rolled out more to the likes of Ballinrobe, to the likes of Kilbeggan, because it does make a difference in those communities that they're supported. I'd also like to raise my own concerns, which have been put to me by local independent bookmakers on account of the rise in the betting tax. And the concerns are that they won't be able to continue, and I'm talking about the independent bookmakers, they're on the high street, or the bookmakers that are on the tracks, beside the track. And also the issue, and it would affect I suppose more so the smaller race courses, a threat of less sponsorship from the big bookmakers on account of this betting tax, and this affects their sustainability in terms of getting sponsorship for races. So I think that we need to be careful how we proceed. I suppose I want to welcome the fact that Minister Donoghue has said he's going to review an aspect of this, and I think that's very important. Because the last thing we want to do is drive more business from the high street, from the independent bookmaker, towards online or whatever else. They're well able to look after themselves online, and the big, I suppose, chain stores of bookmakers that exist also. Just another point then, as has been said by previous speakers, we had the Sports Horse Alliance here. They have a report, they have an economic analysis done by Jim Power. And I think, aside from going into the detail of it, based on what has been done with the horse racing industry and the greyhound industry, I think there's great potential in the sports horse sector as well. And again, it's something that can benefit rural Ireland. It needs support and it needs a framework to proceed to become more professional, so as that we're breeding, we're having the competitions that make us more international, rather than our Olympic athletes, our international medal winners having to always go abroad. You know, an awful lot of the work that's done with sports horses, it seems to me, when I look around where I'm from, seems to be a labour of love, but there's obviously a local economy benefit in it, and some of this has been measured in the report, and I suppose it's open for discussion. The report is a starting point. I know that you increased the budget by 600,000 this year to Sports Horse Ireland, bringing it to 3 million. It obviously pales into, it's not insignificant, it's taxpayers' money, but it's nothing like what we're giving to the horse racing and the greyhound racing. And I suppose, I'm not suggesting we throw money at anything, but I'm just wondering, how are we going to go forward with this to realise the ambitions of people involved in the sports horse sector who are now coming together under this alliance? Like, how can they proceed from here to present something to you that you're willing to fund? Investment in venues, and other issues they raised was basically the passing on of, you know, whether it's apprenticeships or the knowledge seems to be gained or gleaned by people in the sector in a very ad hoc way, and how there can be more educational interventions there, and how we can become more professional and reap the benefits from that professionalism and see benefits in the areas that many of us represent, being the rural areas. So I just ask, Minister, for where you see this going, what we can do, what direction you can give to them here today, because I'm sure they're watching, you know, as to how we're going to advance their cause. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. And finally, Senator Laura, please.
Thanks very much, Chairman, for allowing me speak here this afternoon. I'd like to welcome the Minister and his officials. Just a quick comment with regard to harness racing. One of the key parts that we've looked at both the greyhound and the horse racing sector is the integrity and the way the regulations are applied to it, and they're run by independent bodies within those sectors. And I know in the greyhound sector we are looking at an independent body through the legislation at the moment, and I think that we need to make sure that is in place before any state funding is given to the harness racing sector. That to me would be key on that. Minister, I do welcome the increase in funding. I know during the recession we found it difficult to maintain the funding that we had for the horse racing sector, but that too was going through a hard period. And as Deputy Penrose has alluded to, there is huge pressure on the horse racing industry at the moment. Those at the top are enjoying the benefits, and we could see it quite clearly, the sales in Goffs last week, the fall sales, that the quality horses are at the very top end of the market, and you have to have the good mare and you have to be put across with a good stallion, are making the money. But the vast bulk of those horses, those foals, that a lot of small breeders in the sector are struggling to overcome the cost of the stallion fees. And that is a huge worry within the sector, and that people may mention the number of people, 15,200 people working in this industry. But a lot of those people are working that have one or two mares, are trying to struggle, and if there's anything we can do for them, it's important that we look at that, and it's not at the top end of the market, which seems to be able to hold its own no matter where it is. But it's those guys that Deputy Penrose had mentioned as well. There's also a worry about the competitiveness of Irish racing. And Deputy Penrose has indicated last week there was last Sunday there was a race in the Tri-Town Chase in Navan. 11 were trained by the one trainer. Is that good?
In the first ward.
Yeah, but is that any good for the industry? You know, and the industry has to look at itself, and we're putting in a lot of money from the state perspective. And there's 15,200, as I mentioned earlier on, employed. They're not all employed by the one trainers or two trainers or three trainers. They may have one or two horses in the train. And HRI has to start looking at what it can do to assist those people. A simple suggestion is that you have a races specifically for owners of one or two horses, or a syndicate race, or something like that. Start thinking outside the box so you can help the smaller people instead of looking after the big guys all the time. I'm going to hope that, Minister, you continue to support the capital spend in racetracks. And as Deputy Penrose alluded to earlier on, there are some racetracks can't afford the 60%. There's 40% state funding, 60% covered by the racetracks. Some of them can't, so haven't been able to upgrade their facilities as a result of that. Maybe you might look at the fact that tier them. Say the smaller racetracks with lower turnovers that provide for the local economy, you could give them up to 70% grant. And then the higher ones, such as your Leopardstown, such as your Corral, such as the other ones too as well, reduce them down a bit so that there is a bit more fairness within the industry. And have a look at that too as well, Minister. We notice that the capital spend has been great in racetracks. I see it in my own track in Ace. They've done tremendous work on it. And they are a small little racetrack. The thing that worries me is that when I look at the Curragh and the money that's been spent over there and the overrun that has been associated with it, and also the parade ring that has been built by engineers, I would think, rather than horsey people. You know, it's too small for the track that's able to hold 30 horses, and it can only hold 21. I don't know where the logic went on that, but I hope the extra funding that's required to adjust that doesn't come from the state, that it has to come from those investors who are supposed to be supervising the facility. Minister, I'm going to talk to you about something that's dear to me and is a hugely integral part of the racing and the horse industry, is the Equine Centre in Naas. It's a worldwide leader in what it does. I know it's a private body and all that, but whatever support you can give it, Minister, I really appreciate it. It is acknowledged that what it does there helps to boost the industry. It also improves the integrity of the industry too as well. And it's been used by the state to assist it in disease control on certain subjects. So, Minister, whatever you can do on that, I really would help support. The betting tax, I've scratched my head in this, and I do agree that we need to take more tax out of it. I would have looked at it, say, are we getting the 1% across the board on all sectors? Are we getting it through the exchanges? Are we getting it through online? Are we getting it through the bookmakers? Are we getting it through the tote, which has an offline or an online presence? And we're not getting it through that. And I would have looked at that. However, it has been decided to put the 2%. It's going to impact on small bookmaking firms up and down the country in the high street in many of our villages or many of our towns. And I would like to see some of the money put in that's been collected from this being put into some sort of a fund to help people with gambling addiction, because it's associated with that, if we can do something on that. I would also like to see that not all the extra money that's been collected goes to the horse racing industry, because I think only about 30-35% of the betting now is associated with horse racing. There was a ridiculous thing last weekend, I don't know if anyone saw it last Friday, golf, in which Tiger Woods played Phil Mickelson. Like, it was absolutely disgraceful that these two fellas played a €200,000 bet that who would have a birdie in the first hole. Right? It was disgraceful to see something like that happening by two icons of the golfing industry to encourage people to gamble. And I thought it was totally wrong. But, Minister, there's an awful lot of the sector, within the sector. I agree.
Of their own, the golf.
Yes, I agree totally. Yeah, it was a disgrace, but it highlighted the betting industry at its worst. Yeah, at its worst. But as I said, 30-35% of betting is on the horse sector. The other is on other variety of sports. And maybe let's look at where we can add funding to other sports which are more inclusive than some of the horse racing sector. I mentioned one other thing that has me a little bugbear in mind is Dundalk Racetrack. Fantastic facility. It's not used enough. You know, it's shut down for most of the summer. There's all-weather racing goes on in the UK all the time. We have this fantastic facility that's used maybe twice a week coming up to Christmas, hardly used after Christmas, and used once a week then after that. Like, there's an opportunity to run race meetings for those small trainers, small syndicates and things like that. Let's look at that. Let's start using our imagination on that. I've mentioned about prize fund. I've mentioned about the prize funds and how we can use the prize funds for sort of imaginary type races to get the small people, get them, encourage them. Because as anyone knows, that most of the racing, as Deputy Penrose has alluded to, is all going into the one coffers. When you look at the main races, you can count in one hand the number of owners are associated with it, and it's sad to see. So, Minister, I'm delighted the fact that you've come in here. I have a passion about this sport. I suppose the first time I was brought was about 4 years of age across the fields of Punchestown. I was probably betting. Now that I can't do it, because in those days, under 18s, you had your tote bet and you went up with your 2 shillings, and if you had 2 shillings or whatever it was, and bet it. Now kids can't do that.
You realise that whole...
I know. Kids can't do that now, get that enjoyment. We have to start... You know, it's not to encourage people to get, but it's part of going to a day's racing that. Now, the young fellas that I bring with me, I have to go and do the bets for them because they can't go up and enjoy the pleasure that once was. And it doesn't lead to everyone who makes a bet being a gambler. I know that, and I know I have problems with that. But it's part of the enjoyment of the whole thing. And I think it's a great industry, sir. I think it's when you look at it, and I've been all over the world racing. It's a great pleasure to go to the small tracks. I remember Ballinrobe one day, Naas, and the family were catering those places years ago before. And I saw the industry from all sides of it. And I think it's a great industry. But we need to be able to encourage the small person, the fellow that has the few quid in his pocket, that wants to get involved in a little syndicate, that he has a chance. Thanks, Minister.
Thanks, Senator. A lot of questions there, and some questions obviously be directed for HRI when they come in later on in the year. Okay, over to you, Minister, then, to address the questions.
Thank you, Minister, and our Chairman, and thanks to the members for their questions. And it's obvious that members are deeply interested in the equine industry and indeed the greyhound industry also. And I think the unfortunate position from sitting on this side of this debate is that there's never enough money. There's never enough money in terms of all of the asks. And in the context of what we're doing today, we're very much restricted by the legislation. The legislation provides for the allocation of the funds under the Horse and Greyhound Act, a statutory instrument that provides for the 80-20 split, 80% to HRI, 20% to Board na Gan. So in the context of, say, related issues raised about the Sport Horse Alliance or Horse Sport Ireland or harness racing, it's not within my gift, within the constraints of the legislation at the moment, to allocate from the Horse and Greyhound Fund to any of those, and the funding that they get comes from the generality of the department's allocation. It's not open under the construct of the legislation to allocate under the Horse and Greyhound Fund. And as I said, there is never enough money. And the other point which I'd make, and I think it's reflective of a theme of the contributions, is the top end of the market would survive if HRI was never there. The top end of the market would survive if HRI was never there. Whether it's Listowel or Mallow or Tramore or Kilbeggan or Gordon or Naas or Tipperary or Cashel or Clonmel or Thurles rather, that's in effect where I think there's a need for attention by HRI, and I will be meeting, in fact, later this week with HRI and I know that you will in due course, and I think that's a message that needs to be heard loud and clear. And I make no apology for saying this. In fact, in my first encounter with HRI, and I appreciate we were coming from a situation where, you know, in my first budget, in my engagement with HRI, I made very clearly the point to them that I wanted particular focus on the point-to-point sector. And I think they have responded, in fairness, over the last number of years. That's not to say there isn't more to be done. And I think it's also the case in terms of the smaller people, if I might use that term, in the industry, because, as I said, you know, the top end of the market would survive. But bear in mind, however, it is a very mobile industry. They may survive, but they may not be in Ireland. And that's something we need to be very careful about as well. That we get holistically all of the responses right and proper. But I would say just to Deputy Kinney that, you know, you made reference to one part of the country and land prices and all of that. This is an industry, in fact, if you look at the map of breeding establishments, they're in every one of the counties in the country, in every one of them. Now, they may be more dominant in one or the other, but they are in every county. And, you know, it's about those small breeders with 3 or 4 mares. They are really the backbone of the point-to-point system and of the smaller tracts as well. And that's why I would say that, you know, what HRI does, I think, and if you look at the capital investment that they've been involved in, I've been privileged to be in Listowel, in Killarney, in Mallow, to acknowledge the investment that they've put into smaller tracts. And I know that's replicated, and I know there's, you know, it's perhaps more challenging to come up with the matching funds. But if you take in the showpiece investment, you know, the state-of-the-art investment in the current, that's not at it's in fact a third. So, you know, it's not that there is a one-size-fits-all approach. But I do think these are points that the industry needs to hear. And I certainly will take the views as expressed here to my own engagement with the industry, and I'm sure you will as well. On harness racing, just, you know, in the context of what constraints we have under the Horse and Racing Regulation Act, and the fact that it can't be funded under the statutory instrument that we're talking about today, and just I don't know if I misinterpreted Deputy Penrose's point, but it's 1.28 billion is the cumulative amount up to this point. It's added to every, and it's a lot of money.
650% of an increase from 2001. That's what it is.
Well, no, like it's 2001, 2002, 2003, yeah. 2004. It's every year. It has gone from. It's 1.28 billion.
It's gone from 200 million to 1.3 billion, and that's 650% of an increase over 17 years. It's fantastic. It's way beyond inflation, anyhow.
Yeah, but year on year. I mean, that is the fact. It has gone from that.
It has.
But it is, and I mean, it is. It's a phenomenal.
It's a phenomenal increase
of support.
So we have to get value for money when you compare it to other issues.
Now, just on the harness racing issue, insofar as, and I think it's important to consider this in the context of the Horse Sport Alliance and Horse Sport Ireland. The harness racing people, and I've had engagement with them, and I know you have, and they're very effective communicators and lobbyists for their sector, and I salute that, as the industry generally is, the equine industry. They're a constituent member of Horse Sport Ireland. The Horse Sport Alliance is a lobbyist group for the sport horse sector, as opposed to, you know, in more or less the show jumping sector. I don't want to be entirely prescriptive about what they're asked. But, you know, the opening point I made, there's never enough money. We have increased, I think nearly doubled, in fact, from 2014, the funding which we give. In 2014 it was 1.8 million to Horse Sport Ireland, and it's, for 2019 it will be in the region of 3.5 million. So that's a significant increase. We could spend multiples of it. But I mean, there is an important question here. Is it the core function of this department to fund the high performance end of the sport market? They do receive funding from the Department of Tourism and Sport, and there's a question of the appropriate balance. I appreciate that this is a rural enterprise, horses are reared on farms, etc. But there's a question of whether it's a core function of this department to be involved in the level of funding at that high performance end, or is that a function of the sports department, from whom they also get funding? We will engage with Horse Sport Ireland. We had the Indicon report on Horse Sport Ireland. We have said that once the governance structures were right, that we would, respond in terms of the allocation to them. I think we have, in the context of the trajectory of their funding. But they have a lot of ambition, and they have a lot of constituent members, and some constituent members work through Horse Sport Ireland, some work outside Horse Sport Ireland. The harness racing industry is looking for very substantial capital investment. Now, we got their draft five-year plan for the industry on the 12th of October, which was after the budget for 2019 was concluded. So it makes it difficult to make any substantial progress on the range of issues. And I know they're from the track in Leopardstown, or in Portmarnock rather, to an alternative which Fine Gael local authority may be making available. They are about funding for a staffing complement. And I'm conscious of the fact that if we step into this breach, you don't take on staff for 1 year. There's a recurring commitment. We need evidence of matching funds. We need evidence of governance structures. And to be fair, this is an organisation that I would say is trying to get off the ground. But in terms of the funding we're allocating here today, which is, to HRI and to Board Nagan, they are subject to Controller and Auditor General, scrutiny, etc., accounts, a board. This is an organisation that has yet to get to that level of professional presentation, and we are working with them. We have funded the original Indicon report, the development of their own strategy. We have funded them in terms of investment in various programmes, and we continue to do that. And we would like to see how we could further do things, perhaps even like looking at the stud book. That's an area where we might be able to operate. But in terms of, I would think of, say, for example, a racetrack development. Is that something that could be usefully explored under the Sports Capital Programme, rather than under the Department of Agriculture core funding? It's a sports facility. These are issues that we need to kind of explore. And as I said, we got a draft on the 12th of October. There is consideration of that ongoing. But I don't want to throw cold water all over this, but just in the context of the Horse and Greyhound Fund, it's not possible under the legislation to take it from there. We are trying to do it within the existing allocations as much as we possibly can, bearing in mind that they are one of a number of constituent members of Horse Sport Ireland, whose total allocation is 3.5 million from this department. Their harness racing's ask is a very, very, very substantial part of that total allocation, in terms of what the cost might be of developing that facility, what the cost might be of staffing, complement, etc. So we need to explore these things in further detail. We need to make sure that we, every step that we're taking, we are protecting the public interest and the public purse. I think that's important. Deputy Cahill raised and Senator Lawler raised the issue of the single laboratory service. You raised, Deputy Cahill, and Senator Lawler raised the issue of the equine centre. Now, I think there's probably the genesis of something there in terms of collaboration, and this could extend to the greyhound sector as well. That are there, things that are invested in that are transferable, and certainly I would see, and I hope to visit very shortly, the equine centre. That therein is a requirement for very, very substantial capital investment. Very, very substantial capital investment. Can we explore a model where something akin to what happened in the Curragh, that might be partially funded by others as well as the state. I think that's important. But equally important is if we put in that kind of investment, can we get a return for everybody in terms of what the Equine Centre does now in terms of diagnosis and management and prevention and research, and giving the industry here the international reputation standing that it has because of a facility like the Equine Centre. Can we use the expertise therein then to assist, for example, the greyhound industry in terms of their laboratory requirements, integrity and all of that? I think that's something where we could see, a useful collaborative approach. Are there things in terms of education and training that the broader equine sector needs to do that perhaps RACE has done and the equine industry under HRI has done, that we can leverage some support, benefit to other aspects? And I made this point on occasions to key stakeholders that this might be something that should be explored to a greater detail, and I certainly see the Equine Centre as one of those areas where I think it can deliver. On the issue of on-track bookmakers and on the betting tax generally, they are issues that are not for this department. But I would make the point that the on-track bookmakers certainly add colour to a race meeting. Mind you, anybody that's going, these are the things now that most people bet on. That's the reality, whether we like it or not. But these are the things that most people bet on today, and they do. I certainly would like to see that tradition of on-course betting continuing, and all the supports necessary and soft supports outside of the tax system in terms of location, etc. Being an issue that race courses and HRI, where possible, can assist with. I think I've covered.
Now, Kenny's questions regarding the long-term plan for the two industries, that the point he was making, I think, was that to make them sustainable long-term, self-sustainable.
Well, I think that like all of them, like the greyhound industry has a strategic plan. The HRI has a plan. We now have the Indicon report, which is the backdrop for the horse sport sector. So, we've no shortage of strategic planning. The point I would make is, without this level of funding, as I said earlier, the top end of the market will continue to survive. This funding is critical to the lower end of the market sector in particular. And as I said, there are strategic plans. If the question is making an assumption that you could get to a situation where this industry will stand without state support, I don't see that happening. And as I said, the top end of it might, but the entire edifice of the Irish equine industry is built on a foundation of the small owners and breeders and operators, and if we lose sight of that, we very quickly could have a situation where the base dies out and the mobility of the industry becomes very apparent very quickly in terms of relocation elsewhere, and that's something we need to guard against.
Ricard has a follow-up question.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to the Minister, I want to go back to harness racing and trying to get harness racing off the ground. Now, I think the point that Senator Lawler made here beside me about Dundalk Racecourse, I personally think that harness racing could use that facility, and I think that's where they should be going, and it shouldn't be trying to establish a new track. I think that facility is ideal for what they're trying to do. But if you take it, the 5 races they held there, Minister, and 850,000 betting, we take 2% of that, that's 17,000 in revenue. We take the betting tax off it. So, this industry, in my view, has the potential to, I won't say self-finance, but definitely contribute if they can get off the ground. But unless now they're, I'm in here just 3 years, they've been coming to us, knocking on our door that length of time anyway. Whether they're coming before that or not, I don't know. But they're definitely knocking on the door that length of time now and making representations. The French have put their money where their mouth is with the industry, and they have put money on the table. And I just feel that if we don't make a concrete step forward now, you can only keep an industry like that so long on the embryo stage. And I think if there's not something concrete done to try and get, like, one race meeting a year isn't going to be enough for people to keep the horses, or for the industry to develop. And like in 2019, if we don't expand on that activity, I think that this project will go backwards rather than forwards. And like, they have put a number of individuals have put huge effort into it. They have produced a strategic plan. Now, you say, Minister, I'm not doubting you, you say that it wasn't ready for budget time. They say different, but lobby groups can always stretch the truth a bit. So we won't start getting into an argument about when the plan came on the table. But I feel unless we make a meaningful contribution to this industry, they are going to go backwards. They've put an awful lot of work into it. They've shown that the industry can attract betting outside the country, and I think we need to make a commitment to it, Minister. And like 850,000 on 5 races in Dundalk was a substantial figure of betting, and to do that on a once-off occasion, I think was very, very significant. We've talked about provincial racetracks there a good few times today. They wouldn't have that in 5 or 6 meetings, don't mind on 5 races, bet on the toes. So, I think unless we take a step forward here, I'm afraid that this aspect of horse racing will take a lot of steps backwards.
Deputy, to conclude, Minister, on that point.
Yeah, look, I mean, we have put our money where our mouth is. We have invested. I mean, and we need to be careful that we in terms of public funds, that we move in a way that is appropriate. And, in terms of the Indicon report in 2017 was 57,000. The 5-year plan for the organisation, which we are paying for, is in excess of 60,000. We are paying for their 5-year plan. Is in excess of 60,000 in 2017. We gave over 40,000 on equine technical support in 2018. There was additional funding under the same heading in 2017. We had 27,000 for welfare support. You'll be aware some of that was spent in Tipperary on the issue of harness racing on public roads and trying to increase awareness and welfare, etc. So we have put public funds into the sector. Now, as I said earlier, like they're one of many affiliates of Horse Sport Ireland, and I'm conscious, like, if people feel that they can go outside the umbrella body and work, will every affiliate of Horse Sport Ireland then feel what's the point of being part of a parent organisation and think that they can campaign independently? I mean, we have to be careful how we proceed and that it's appropriate. Your observations regarding Dundalk Track are interesting. They had a meeting there. Is that something that could be resurrected rather than, the requirement that they're pursuing in terms of capital investment? It was originally, I think, several 100,000 was what was required in the context of Portmarnock. It then became multiples of that in terms of a new venue in North County Dublin on the Dublin-Meath border. We need to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable. Anybody can buy a track and develop a track, but is it sustainable long term? Is it the right thing to do? Are there opportunities to further, have further meetings in Dundalk, for example, which you say yourself it would be the right thing, rather than the big capital investment? Exploring further, if we put in funding, is there matching funding coming in terms of staffing supports, in terms of accommodation offices, etc.? None of which is there now. We are working with these people. We have a draft plan since the 12th of October. But they are one constituent member of many in Horse Sport Ireland. So we need to make sure that we're fair to everybody as well.
Okay. Any further questions before we finish up on this point, this area? Okay, if there's nothing else, that concludes our consideration of the motion. According to standing orders, A message was sent to the Clerk of Dáil and Clerk of the Senate saying this committee has completed its consideration of the motion. Is this agreed? Okay. I thank the Minister and officials for coming before the committee today to discuss this important matter. If there's no further business in this area, I'd just like to suspend this part of the meeting to allow the officials to leave and the other officials to come in before the committee. So suspend for a couple of minutes.